Welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments, the best growth mindset podcast recognized by Million Podcasts and ranked as a top mindset podcast by FeedSpot. We're proud to be in the top 1% on Listen Notes. Join Dr. Alisa Whyte as we explore powerful insights and strategies to elevate your mindset. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Mindset Mastery Moments, Disruptors. We are here disrupting limiting beliefs, and we're challenging how we think, elevate, and how we live, lead, and build a legacy. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. Alisa, and today's conversation is going to be a stretch to your thinking and you moving into thinking the best way you ever could. But let me ask you something. What if healing wasn't about suppressing symptoms? What if it wasn't about numbing pain? What if it was about rewiring the mind intentionally? We talk a lot about mindset on our show, of course, but mindset isn't just philosophy. It's biology. It's neural pathways. It's plasticity. And today we're going into the science of literally setting our minds, right? I am joined by the gorgeous Dr. Sharon Niv, a cognitive psychologist whose work spans mindfulness, cognitive science, and the psychology of consciousness. She is the co-founder of Joyous PBC, a public benefit company dedicated to making mental health care more accessible through low-dose psychoholetic ketamine approaches. You're going to understand what that word means if you haven't heard it before, because until her, I didn't know. I'm not going to tell you, but I understand. She leads clinical research. She designs digital therapeutics. She trains therapists nationwide. And under her leadership, over 83,000 patients have received support through innovative low-dose treatment models. Sharon, Dr. Sharon, we are so excited to have you on Mindset Master Moments. Welcome, welcome. Tell us who you are in your own words, what you do and why you do it.
Dr. Whyte, thank you so much for being here. It's really like an honor and a pleasure. I really appreciate you. I'm a cognitive psychologist. You're very welcome. I've been interested in innovating ways of scaling mental health for a long time. And in 2022, I was given this opportunity to be part of the co-founding team of this company, Joyous. And as you said, Public Benefits Corporation. And for people who don't know what that means, because it's not like super well known, we are a corporation. We're not like a nonprofit, but in our charter and in the structure of a PBC, there's this message that mission comes above shareholder value. So we are allowed to make decisions that uphold our mission rather than like, the price of the stock or whatever. And so our mission is to enable, I've been writing this out recently, enable individuals, families, communities, and humanity to live a joyful life. And part of that is, as you said, accessibility. So we aim to be the most affordable prescriber of ketamine nationwide, and that is, to the best of our knowledge, the case. And that has allowed us to treat a huge number of people. We did decide to go with this very low dose approach as opposed to some of the telehealth companies that are doing high dose ketamine. So there are some ways of getting journey dose ketamine. Journey dose ketamine differs from the psycholytic, which is the doses that we're using, in a couple of pretty profound ways. And both are valuable tools for sure. We are not here to poo-poo high dose stuff. It's just that the low dose stuff is its own set of benefits, better suited to the needs of certain clients, certain patients. Happy to jump into all of that.
Yeah, so let's break it down, because we're gonna put our definitions on the table so those who are listening and they're like, okay, so what is this? What do you mean? Some people are not very sure on what ketamine is. They might know it as something else. Let's talk about your background first and how it bridges contemplative practices of cognitive psychology, because it's not random, the combination that you are and how you work. So walk us through your journey. And how did you go from traditional therapy and mindfulness work into psychoholetic medicine?
So I did my graduate work it was in clinical psychology, and then I didn't go on to do an internship and get a license. So I'm not a licensed therapist myself, though I have
Therapist.
worked, yeah, many patients of Joyce's and given meditations and given exercises and practices. So I do have experience with that. But for example, we'll be talking, I'm sure, about our therapist collaboration training program. I did train those therapists, but much more on like the cognitive science, the neuroscience, and I left the clinical stuff to licensed clinician. That feels like the right thing to do. So I do
Exactly.
absolutely. So I do have like the theoretical background and like years of working as a trainee as a therapist. I myself am not a therapist. I became very interested in technology around mental health back in grad school, actually. I did get interested in neurofeedback at the time, virtual reality for various
Whoa.
psychological conditions. I started a company that's still up and around called Karuna, and when I co-founded it, we used VR to kind of mimic what's known as mirror box therapy, which is a way of using embodiment to help with like phantom limb pain. So you can use VR to address pain by embodying onto an avatar. It's very interesting stuff. They now
Wow.
have like IFS in the model. They're doing interesting things. So it's always been a question of, okay, we've got a lot of technology, we've got a lot of suffering. What do we do now? At some point,
Mm-hmm.
probably 2013, 14, I became very interested in contemplative science, like you said, and meditation. Contemplative science just means like the science of meditation and consciousness, and like how do we take the wisdom traditions and start to make sense of them with modern cognitive science.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I started getting really interested in different meditative approaches and how, when people say meditation, they often just mean like mindfulness, watch the breath. But I think
Yes.
that meditation, the word, is similar to exercise. If someone tells you they exercised yesterday, you don't know if they went for a run, went for a swim, went dancing, lifted weights. Meditation is the same thing. It can mean
Yes.
so many different practices with different out.
Yes.
And then psychedelics are fascinating, but I was never particularly gung ho on psychedelics per se. But the opportunity to start Joyous was kind of presented to me by the chairman of the company, whom I've known since childhood. And he's this very smart, very successful guy. And we met for lunch one day, and he said, "My next venture will be in the psychedelic space." And I was like, "Consider me." And he gave
You
me
want to
that
explore.
opportunity. So that
Yeah.
was really and the more I learned about ketamine and psychedelics on the whole, but ketamine in particular, the more aligned it really felt. So I think that might
Uh-huh.
be a good way. You had a lot of questions about ketamine specifically. What is it?
Yes. Yes.
It's it's a fascinating medicine. So it's not a classic psychedelic like mushrooms or LSD. They work on the serotonin system in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Ketamine works on a very different system, glutamate GABA. And it is not in the psychedelic family of medicines, it's in the dissociative anesthetic family of medicines.
Mm.
Because it works in this glutamate system, which is one of the most prevalent neurotransmitter systems in the brain, if not the most, it's the primary excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. That means like almost every time there's a neuron firing, glutamate's involved.
Mixed about glutamate's coming out.
Really pervasive effects. What's super interesting about ketamine, actually, so many things are, but one interesting thing about it is so dose dependent. Like in high
Mm.
dose, it's surgically anesthetic. You can give it to a child. It's safe enough to give in pediatric surgery or like battlefield surgery. Yeah, it is a very safe medicine. It's on the World Health Organization's essential medicines list. It doesn't suppress respiratory or cardiovascular activity at all.
Wow. I'm so glad we're talking about this. Yeah.
It has the reputation of being a club drug or a party drug, and it is.
Yes. Right.
We have to acknowledge that it is, but used with intention, it can be a very powerful tool. So very high dose, or you're out for surgery. A little bit
Yeah.
lower, well, not a little bit, somewhat lower, you get into what they call the K-hole space, which is a detachment from sense of self. There is kind
Mm.
of an ego death that happens, and it can be very visual, very different quality of visuals than what you might imagine with LSD or psilocybin mushrooms, but
Mm-hmm.
still very visual, kind of
Mm-hmm.
crystalline. People describe like traveling through celestial crystalline palaces and stuff like that, but it is visual. A little bit lower, and you are in the journey dosing. So you might have heard of
Mm.
like ketamine or intramuscular IM. You can go to a clinic and get that done and have a journey. You can also do a CAP, which is ketamine assisted psychotherapy at high doses. And usually what that looks like is you're coming to your therapist's office. Uh, Ahead of time, you've had another session to do preparation, like set your intentions, talk about where you'd like to go. You come to the session, it's maybe 3-4 hours. You take the medicine, put on some eye shades and lie down. There's music, and you're on a journey. You may say a few words, and your therapist will write them down. And then there's going to be later in a week or a few days an integration session where you discuss what happened. That's
Mm,
usually what CAP looks like at high doses. But then you take it
okay.
a little bit lower to the psycholytics doses that we're using, and it's
Using.
just it's very different. It is like ketamine tipsy. It's about the equivalent of having like a glass and a half of wine. It's a very different phenomenology, but that's about as
As
altered as
as you would be. Okay.
yeah.
And so what does it look like when you are in that state, and how long does that look for like a patient working at Joyous?
40 to 60 minutes
Okay.
um about, and then there's probably a 2 to 3 hour period where you feel a real sense of calm. And then over time, you just realize that your mood has lifted, your depression and anxiety symptoms have really reduced. This is the case for about 70% of our patients. And so it
Okay.
lasts about 40, 60 minutes. And the way it feels is to some extent, you always have to describe things when you're talking about states of consciousness, because it's like,
Right.
how do you imagine
How do
you've
you know
never
if you've never
experienced
done it? So yeah. So we need a
but
comparison.
the way that I would describe it is spacious. It feels like you're a little bit bigger than your body because it has that dissociative property.
Hey, that's how I
You
feel
kind
when
of
I get really
yeah,
tipsy because I can't handle my alcohol.
yeah, you feel expansive. It doesn't
Yeah.
taste as good as alcohol, I'll say that. That's
Okay.
unfortunate.
So
What it
it's
is.
taken in like a beverage, in a,
Yeah, oh,
how should I say, liquid form, or is it a infusion?
I
How
should have
is
brought
it?
my pack. It's in the other room, but
Okay.
they're little waxy cubes, maybe like this big, and
Okay.
kind of like tobacco snuff. You stick it between your jaw and your
Oh,
cheek, your
uh-huh.
gums over there, and it just
And it
absorbs
dissolves
over time. Really depends how wet your mouth is, how hot your mouth is, but probably about 15 minutes for most people.
for it to
And then
dissolve.
the
Okay.
effects are like 40, 50, maybe 60 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So about an hour, 3 hours later, you're still in this calm, spacious. Are you able to go back to work if you needed to, regular life? Okay. And then what are the effects? How often would someone go through this type of therapy? What does that look like? Is it something they're going to be? And if you all are following along with Dr. Sharon, we will bring you back around. We're setting the prefaces of what's happening at Joyous, but then we'll come back to how this works and why it's something, why it's something that more and more people are using the treatment and the benefits of it. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But y'all just follow us. So
Absolutely.
let's go. Why would someone want to be going through this type of therapy? What kind of like illnesses or challenges, neurodiverse part of the spectrum they're on? Share that background with us and then bring us forward after medication. What does life look like and what are their goals?
Perfect.
A whole
So,
mouthful.
yeah. You also asked, I don't want to drop it, like how often they do it too. So I'll start there. Our program is daily for at least 6 weeks. And after about 6 weeks, we tell them right off the bat, when your symptoms have improved, it's up to you to start thinking about, would you like to space out, your doses? The idea is it's not like an SSRI, like a Prozac that you have to take every single day. It's a matter of how much you really need it. And it's up to you to decide, do I want to be on daily medication? Do I want to try every other day, every 3 days, so that's something that many of our patients do experiment with and find their own cadence. The people who come in the door are usually either depressed, anxious, or struggling with PTSD, effects of trauma. And the reasons they might want to try joyous, there's several. For one, many people are treatment resistant. They've been in therapy, they've tried 3 SSRIs, they don't want to be on Xanax every day of their life, and they shouldn't be. And they want to try something else that works on a different system and has more of a track record for getting at the roots of the problem, which is really number two. Ketamine allows, because of that dissociative state, it allows you to make contact with the nervous system dysregulation, with the difficult emotionality that might be too overwhelming otherwise. And as we know from Body Keeps the Score and myriad other examinations of trauma and even like little t trauma, right? We can all acknowledge everyone has trauma, even if they haven't experienced the big T trauma. Those things can be really hard to feel into. They're overwhelming. It makes the body feel, really tight, condensed, heavy, sick, panicked. Those things are hard to make contact with. And that ketamine state of, I'm actually a little bit bigger than my body, I'm spacious, I'm expanded. Suddenly, those same nervous system sensations don't feel quite as bad and they're able to be processed. And so people pretty spontaneously often feel that they're releasing like many of their patterns that keep them stuck, keep them ruminating. And that's really what we see in the brain too, is a huge amount of rewiring and neuroplasticity. It's one of my therapists recently said it's like miracle grow for the brain, because you see these neat images of dendrites, which are like the fingers on neurons that collect neurotransmitters, and post ketamine, it's just like so many more. You're really building new pathways.
For anyone who listens to the podcast, know I talk about me suffering a brain injury when I was younger. And it came down to, and that was in 1994, back in the days in Guyana, South America, where medical technology was obviously behind. And so what they determined finally, and my family had a doctor who came from the USA to the St. Joseph Mercy Hospital in Guyana. And his final diagnosis was I had damaged tissues around my brain. They weren't sure. The prognosis was they don't know if, when, how long, if ever, these tissues and cells would repair, which without him telling me, it's more than likely dendrite. So that's just my thought process as I learned and went into a little. So I'm really, I don't want to say I'm obsessed, but I kind of am obsessed with brain science, only because in my time, I'm a miracle, because their prognosis was I would continue to have these silent seizures or whatever. I wouldn't be able to be by myself, wouldn't be able to finish high school, can't get an education, won't be this. Like my whole life was just mapped out to be like this dependent soul.
And here you are, yeah.
Anything but. And there were times when, for many years, my family would be so protective of me, and rightfully, because it wasn't something that just went away. And then eventually I had scans and my brain was normal. So it's a living, breathing miracle for me. But these are things you can't really see and measure, because there were times I still had silent seizures and and it was due to trauma as well. So that combination just made it the big T. I had a family member hit me in the head and that was it. Took me out and that was the injury. So it was all that combined. And so when we're talking about this kind of thing, because trauma in and of itself, like you said, big T, little t, and again, my T, your T. Like you and I could have been in the same home. When that happened to me, physically, I got impacted with it, but traumatically for you, saw it happen, and it means something else that puts you in a neurodiverse space. How it looks and what it looks like I think it's about 9 main ones of neurodiverse conditions, the ACEs, right? Is it 8 or is it 9?
I think you're right about
9 main
ACEs.
ones. Yeah, I think it's about 9. I was just looking at them yesterday as I was going over this. So with all that, we can end up anywhere, because now they have, I think, the 9th one, Dr. Sharon, it's the one where you can sort of become neurodiverse by association and environment.
Yeah.
That's new to me.
Yeah.
I did not know this. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So even that for young children is now a whole nother level of trauma. But when we talk about these dendrites regrowing, like, I'm fascinated by that because a lot of so recently we had an episode that aired on Monday with I forgot what her name was, and we were talking about eliminating limiting beliefs.
Okay.
People struggle a lot, right? And so people struggle when they've gone through the big T's that we can identify. We know it's happening, but those who suffer silently with a big T or even a medium-sized T, we don't know what's happening. They don't know what's happening. So being able to have treatment where this sort of, in my opinion, rebirth of brain cells are happening, tell us, where do you think conventional therapy hits limits and now psychoholistic medicine is really pushing us past those limits?
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to add to all this discussion of ACEs, little t, big T trauma, one thing that occurs to me in addition is like, I recently read Complex PTSD by Pete Walker. I can't remember, but it's a fascinating book. And one thing he says in there is like chronic misattunement in childhood, that on its own can cause CPTSD. Like if you didn't get emotional resonance, if you cried and your family environment was just like, man up again and again and again, like that too is trauma. So I like just want the
So many
listeners to
men
know that.
and boys, so many. Yes, definition of trauma right there. And we had another episode with Dr. Jalali a few weeks ago too, where we were talking about definition of trauma. Because a lot of people think of trauma, oh, you had a big car accident when, or your spouse or partner physically abused you, mentally, emotionally degraded you, or, your parent died when you were 10 or 2, things like that. We always like, oh, it's so traumatic. But let's face it, just abandonment and neglect, your emotional needs and wants not being met, even as an adult, right? In an adult relationship, men and women who've gone through some degree of narcissistic abuse, whether the person had been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, these events have shown your brain ages, slow down, and your foggy brain, you're not able to function well. It's not just about confidence and self-belief and motivation and the drive to do things. It's literally, they've tested people's brain and watch that it's not doing anything. There's parts of it that is a black hole. So walk us through where now we have the diagnosis where we can see what's happening with different types of brain. And the story is very simple. It's not a big story like what we expect, like went to combat war. And the limitations, like, okay, well, we don't know. Keep sending him to therapy. We'll just talk therapy. And why those have limitations and how we're surpassing it now with psychoholistic medicine.
Totally. Would this be helpful? What's the limitation of conventional therapy where this would be helpful? And I would say I think it's two things. One is when there is a resistance, like a very strong protective resistance against feeling certain emotions. They're too challenging, they're too painful, or maybe in the parlance of like parts work and IFS, your protector comes up and is like, the system can't handle that. I got to protect the vulnerable part of me from feeling this shame, this guilt, this terror, whatever it is, I'm not ready to touch it yet. And then ketamine at that point can provide this blanket of safety where it becomes possible to safely explore and make contact with these emotions and really be with them in a way that allows all. The other thing is when you're so stuck cognitively, and these are related, it's not like, they're separate categories, but it's another way to answer the question is when you have limiting beliefs or like rigidity around the way that you view yourself, others, or the world, ketamine, because again, that dissociative experience can kind of shift perspective. It quiets down your normal thinking brain. It shifts the balance between top down and bottom up, and that takes a little unpacking. So I'll unpack it a little bit. We've really learned in cognitive science that we view the world not so much through our senses, but through our beliefs that the senses have formed. So there's this like interplay between the top down, the sensory information coming up, and the bottom up, which is our beliefs about that information. And actually, the beliefs tend to. So if you have, say, a
Yes.
tendency to think that people are dangerous and untrustworthy, perceptions you're likely to that perceptions that you're likely to derive are based less on what people are actually expressing to you and more on kind of
Yes.
the belief of the lens where you're seeing that ambiguous expression on their face is likely to be interpreted as threatening rather than like neutral, confused. This person's tired. This really strong rigidity of thinking, ketamine we know this through neuroscience, shift the balance from the top down to the bottom up and allows you to kind of reappraise the actual information before you and rewrite some of your perspectives. So those, I think, are the main two things I would say about that. When you're stuck because you're too scared to feel something for good reason, and when you're stuck
Yeah.
because your beliefs are too rigid. Those are good ways to
Right.
think of ketamine being helpful in the therapy room.
So I can't remember. I think it's Michael Singer, and I can't remember. It's not the seat. That's Gary Gukov, or maybe might be Gary that said it, or Michael Singer, talking about the observer and how there's the one that's thinking, the one that's doing, and then the one that's just watching it all happen. Now I think of the one that's watching as the sage. So there's the sage version of Alisa. So it sounds like when we are in a psychoholetic space or state, the higher self is able to have conversation with the doer and the talker. And it's like, let's have a meeting. Let's have this come together. And now the sage gets to talk to the other two. And now they're like, so higher self said, now let's serve. Let's go correct. And so it's my little story that I tell myself, right? Because I have not done any psychedelic yet. We have a couple of guests on, and then I'm supposed to, like, one of my guests that we had last year, I think he was our very first one to talk about medicinal psychedelics, or maybe the second one, but he actually created, can't remember what it's called. I have it in my kitchen, but I have to do a consultation with him to understand how to use it so I can, because my life is so busy and I've been concerned that, oh, I'm just going to take it and I'm going to spaz out and I'm just going to be chill.
Yeah.
Everything about my research says that's not how it works. You just do that. And even if you meditated and went to sleep, you'll be fine. But I overthink. So I'm like, I have not slowed down since I've gotten this stuff from him. But it's, for me, as a high achiever, and for those who are listening, we definitely move so quickly. We have so much to do. We're answering the call on our lives for purpose. The world, I don't want to say it's getting more challenged, but we're in unique situations. And I think it's a better time for us to hone in as humans on the planet and focus in on what our why is and be just busy doing that. Not to ignore what's happening and ignore reality, but I feel like our consciousness levels are rising higher every day on the planet. And this type of medicine, this type of treatment, these processes and spaces is our next level of ascension. That's just my thought. I'm not saying anything to co-sign anything. I'm not asking Dr. Sharon to do it. That's my perspective, guys. This is why I have guests like Dr. Sharon, because who else but those who are on the front line who have worked, created, built not just the spaces, but these treatments and understand it, biology, psychology, whatever you want to call it, the methodology, everything, to share with us, and we get a little bit more insight. It bigger than reading, in addition to reading and doing our own research. Here's the thing, Dr. Sharon, because on this show, I often say your brain is not fixed. Your identity is not fixed. Your story is not fixed. But people don't always understand what that means biologically. So walk us through what's actually happening when I do go through, and you shared a little bit with us. How does it really support our actual cognitive change when you go through the low dose of ketamine treatment?
That's a great question. So as I said, it shifts the balance from the top down to bottom up. So one thing that happens there is a reduction in activity in a network called the default mode network. Default mode network is it's a cool story how it was discovered. It was discovered by people hanging out in the fMRI machines, and they were told, like, do nothing. We need turns out if you tell someone do nothing, they don't like go blink like Buddha. They think, they
Exactly
like
what we do. We start doing things. Why can't I do
they
anything?
think,
If I was supposed to do
wow,
something, what would I do?
like, what was the thing I said yesterday? Should I have said something else? What does that thing have to do tomorrow? Self-evaluating, biographical thinking, to-do list. So to-do list is a little different. It kind of depends if you're outward oriented to like finish a task or you're
Right.
ruminating on your own. That doesn't have to be like even negative thinking, but it usually is. We find that default mode network or DMN activity correlates with a lot of negativity. So the
Mm-hmm.
default mode
Mm-hmm.
network was just discovered because when people were doing nothing, they were like, wow, there's all this like pattern of activation. What is that? It's related to sense of self. It's related to self-evaluation, self-appraisal, beliefs about how you function within society, etc. And when
Mm-hmm.
that gets quieter, when we have a lot of activation going on that is aside from the default mode network, it allows for kind of like an annealing process. It's almost like the brain becomes, the chaos in the brain rises a little bit because usually it's so rigid. The way we view the world is through our beliefs. What we expect is usually what we receive. And when you turn down the beliefs, you kind of like shut down that scaffolding a little bit, and you allow for all the activity beneath to start bubbling up. It allows you to start
Mm-hmm.
reappraising, start deciding what to favor. There's a part of the brain called the reticular activation center, I believe, that is kind of
Yes.
like what you give your attention to. So
Too.
so if you use that time with ketamine where the entropy rises and the beliefs reduce, you have this opportunity to decide, well, okay, how am I going to rearrange the contents of my mind? And so what we always tell patients is what you do in this time matters. Now, listen, if you are working
Mm-hmm.
3 jobs, you've got 3 kids, and you have to take your medicine and clean your house, you're doing what you can, that's fine. But if you can afford to take those 40 minutes, do a little meditation, walk in nature, and then journal, you're doing yourself a huge service. Over half of our patients don't actually have therapists. Again, we're aiming to be the most affordable, which is like it's $129 a month if you sign up for 3 months. Otherwise, I think it's $159. And so with that, we can't afford to
And
pay
this is a
therapists, which
dose
is why we're
every
training
day?
your therapist. Yeah. So for a month, it's $129 a
Wow.
month.
That's so
But yeah, but so
affordable for anybody
I
who
think so.
wants to be treated.
We like to think,
Yeah.
we hope so. And there's financial aid for, I think about 8 to 9% of patients receive that if they're going through hardship. Um, so
Wow.
what you choose to do with that time, even if you don't have a therapist, if you have a therapist, we really encourage bring your therapist in to get trained by us. That's our Joys for Therapists program. And then bring your medicine
Mm.
into your session, have some real breakthroughs. But if you don't, what you do still matters. Take that 40 minutes to be with yourself, set an intention. How do I want to show up in this situation differently? How do I want to be with this person in my life? Like, ask yourself a question. What's blocking me from doing the thing that I know I need to do? And just be with that question. Journal on it, meditate on it,
Uh-huh.
do whatever you need to get some movement going. The more
Uh,
intentional you are, the better able that neuroplasticity is to fall in the direction that serves you. And I love that you brought up this like highest self, I think you called it. We say true
yes.
nature,
The
but
sage.
there's
Yeah.
totally the sage. So many
My
words.
sage
IFS
self.
calls
I say
itself,
my sage
yeah,
self.
self, your inner wisdom, your self with a capital S, all of that really points to the same thing, which is our inner knowing, our inner wisdom, our part of us that is aligned with integrity and knows what's real and knows what's true. Yeah. And is loving too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is loving. Yes. And patient and all these things that I say in our everyday frontline self desires to be, you already are. You already are. That's what I say. We're perfect, whole, and complete. You've also cited a 68% response rate and nearly a 48% remission for depression in real world reviews. Can you contextualize that for us? Because how significant is that compared to traditional antidepressants?
It is definitely higher. We're now reanalyzing all that data with partners from University of Calgary, University of Alberta. So now I'm like, are those numbers exactly accurate? That's what we found when our data scientists did it internally, but I don't know what's going to get published. It's probably going to be around there though. Our data scientist was good.
Right.
It's a high degree of success. I think that the studies on SSRIs really vary. It seems like there's probably a huge variance in like who is best matched to what that we're still kind of figuring out. Maybe you're best with Paxil, you're best with Zoloft, who knows? But on average, antidepressants have effectiveness rates of about 30%. And so ketamine is more likely
Yeah.
to be helpful. Then again, like, listen, if you've been on Wellbutrin for many years and it's going great for you, great. But if it's not going well for you, if you're having sexual side effects, if not on Wellbutrin, but on Paxil, Zoloft, SSRIs, sexual side effects, weight
I
gain,
was going to ask you
feelings of
about
numbness.
Paxil.
Yeah, Paxil, like Paxil,
Wow.
the antidepressant specifically. Yeah. I mean, they
Yes,
all have
because
this profile.
those they're hard
We might be getting
to come off of, is what I've learned. Yeah.
That's right. They are hard to come off of. Yeah. Yeah. There are people who've
So
taken
have
like
you found
months to
that clients are able to move? Oh,
many of our
yeah.
patients have been able to get off of SSRIs, which they're very grateful for.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. Now that's a true breakthrough. Okay. So let me ask you this. Let's talk a little bit about neurodiversity and neuroplasticity. I want you to talk to us about how should I frame this? I want to make sure I frame this correctly because we cannot talk about neuroplasticity without talking about neurodivergence. We started to talk about it a little bit. Just for those who listen, can you just define what each of those are cognitively, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how people with ADHD, autism, and on the spectrum are actually benefiting from this therapeutic model. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So neuroplasticity just means change in the brain. Plastic means changeable. And so that could mean birth of new neurons, which as far as I know, ketamine doesn't necessarily have those. Those are usually found in the hippocampus. And there was actually some thinking that SSRIs
Right.
could cause neuro birth, which is cool. Neurogenesis is called. But as we said earlier, the neuroplasticity most associated with ketamine is this dendritogenesis, right? So the dendrites form.
Mhm.
And it just means that
Mhm.
there's a saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together. And
Wired
the
together.
wiring part, yeah, the wiring part is the strengthening of the synapses. So, like getting stronger ties between neurons is how those pathways strengthen. And when you have more, like really, you've got a neuron, this is the neuron, and this is the hillock where it releases. And then you've got the postsynaptic neuron that like receives the neurotransmitters and the message can continue. But what you have with ketamine is instead of 5 fingers here, you have 15. So it's just like it's catching more of the neurotransmitters and that strengthening of the synapse happens. And so
Yes.
that's the neuroplasticity and specifically the type that we see with ketamine. And then neurodivergence, I think it's real that there probably is to some extent like a normative brain, but there are several categories like ADHD, as you said, like autism spectrum that vary from that more normative brain in more specifically mappable ways, even though I have heard the saying, you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, right? Because there is
Right.
such divergence within the neurodivergence
There
category. But honestly, I think that there are so many types of underappreciated neurodivergency. Personality disorders are neurodivergent. Psychosis is certainly neurodivergent. The thing is, there's a neurodivergence that can be sort of like medically treated, kind of like
diagnosed and treated.
yeah, and then there's stuff that's a little bit harder to treat with medication, at least to the point where it approximates like normative functioning. So like it's very hard to say treat autism with just medication. You can treat certain
Exactly.
symptoms. If there's like a aggression, you can treat that with some like
Right. Maybe there's
antipsychotics or
self-harm or something. Yeah. But you're
exactly.
not
You could
treating autism. You're
not treat
treating
the symptom.
different things that's happening with the brain because you're neurodivergent. It's just, and that's the thing people don't understand. There's no medication per se for neurodivergence of itself because a lot of people who are neurodivergent have a hodgepodge, or someone call it like I forgot what someone called it when I heard it for a little while ago. Let's talk about some of the things. How might psychoholistic approaches uniquely support individuals who feel stuck in patterns of anxiety, rumination, and burnout? And where
Mhm.
do we need to exercise caution when being treated
Yep.
in general, not just with ketamine and the way you all are doing it, but when we think about psycholytic approaches, what are some of those, what are some of the benefits and where should we identify exercising caution?
Absolutely. Okay, I'll start with the caution because I think it's a really important one. So, we definitely want to be careful with certain pre existing conditions. People with a history of psychosis or a history of mania, not hypomania. So, if you've got bipolar 2 that we can treat, bipolar 1, we're like, that's a little too severe for telehealth. We don't want to destabilize you. There are some studies on bipolar 1 and ketamine, but we think that suggest it's helpful, but we think work with a psychiatrist much more closely if it's a high acuity condition like that. Psychosis is a hard
Yes.
no. If you have a history of strong addiction, maybe not the best idea. And again, there's actually evidence on that. I just sent someone over LinkedIn today a study on how ketamine is helpful for coming off of opioids. So it is a complex and not a simple black and white, but we're not going to touch it over telehealth. That's too risky, and you should be working
Right.
with someone closely at that point. So those
Okay.
are those hard no's. There are some medical contraindications too. Uncontrolled high blood pressure, not a good idea because it can elevate transiently the blood pressure. History of cerebral hemorrhaging, a history of epilepsy, also not good. There are various conditions, and if anyone is curious if they would qualify or not, they can just go to our site, which is joyous.team, and
Okay.
there's a little survey there that's like, am I a candidate or get started or something, and it'll just
Yeah.
ask you those questions and tell you maybe you're not a good fit if you have one of these conditions. But it
Okay.
plays really nicely with all medications as far as we know. If people are on stimulants for ADHD, we suggest that they take it about 4 hours apart. And that's also because both can raise blood pressure transiently,
Hmm.
but they're not incompatible. So that's one. Who else might not be a good fit? People with unstable living situations or unstable lives in general, even though this is a much gentler approach than like the high dose stuff where you might have some revelation you're not ready for, that's less likely here, but you still need to be, wise about whether it's a good time or not to do the deeper work. So
Right.
that's something to think about.
Those are
Those are
those
the no.
guardrails.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking you asked, how does it help with burnout, anxiety, rumination? So
Hmm.
first, it does quiet down the thinking mind, which is really associated with that default mode network again, that chattering, like internal narrative quiets down. You get to see things from a different perspective. Many of the patterns that you've experienced may kind of resolve on their own just by being felt and released, as we said.
Hmm.
And if you devote your time to forming more positive beliefs, more accurate beliefs, then you're likely to replace many of the thinking patterns that have kept you stuck in those loops and really lay down some new foundations.
And that's why when we are talking about this type of therapy on Mindset Master Moments, it's so important because or I'm saying myself as a brand and my beliefs in what mastering of your mindset is, it's that deeper work. It is not motivation. It's just not mere good positive self-talk. It's not good meditation habits because over and over, the science is there to prove it's no different than if you bought a house that had mold everywhere in the bathroom. You
Yeah,
couldn't just come in and paint it with a paintbrush.
right.
You would have to uproot and take out those walls, all of it, and then
Got it.
rebuild with new wood and cement, whatever you're doing, but it's going to be gutted to get rid of that mold. I believe the same thing with toxic beliefs that are limiting you, whether it's in the space of being a workaholic, being an alcoholic, being addicted to opioids, or being addicted to pornography, you name it, whatever that is, or maybe just being addicted to being right, or maybe, and I'm saying just being
Your
addicted
thoughts.
to, yeah, just whatever is just got a grip on you in an abnormal way that limits your function as a human being. This is all mindset is the key to your success, but you have to do the deep work, and it includes therapy. Now, what we're looking at here in this very time and season of our lives, like never before on planet Earth, let's be real. And Dr. Sharon, can you shed some light on this? Ketamine and even psychoholetic treatment in general is not new to the planet Earth. Hello. Our ancestors in most, or if not all, of our different traditional forms of medicine used these medicines. Talk to us about that, Dr. Sharon.
It's absolutely true. There's even a hypothesis that we really like, there's a massive drive forward in our evolution due to psilocybin giving us the ability to self-reflect and like driving forward consciousness. But who knows? That's a theory. But yeah, absolutely. There's this aspect that we don't talk about around sacredness and the spirit and the true ability of these medicines to connect us to our deepest knowing that we've forgotten. We've forgotten our goodness. We've forgotten our connection to source. We've forgotten, it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. Almost everyone under high doses of psilocybin or high doses or even low doses of ketamine, MDMA will reconnect to something sacred within. And our ancestors knew that and they used it wisely. And there were practices. There's something very nice and comforting about ketamine being this. Actually, it is derived from a fungus, so cool, but
Right.
naturally derived. We don't really know how it's made. It's like kind of a secret. There are like 6 labs in the world that actually produce ketamine, but whatever. That said,
Right.
it's nice that there isn't an indigenous root here because I think we'd have some, I wouldn't want to be selling microdosed ayahuasca. That doesn't sound
So
respectful. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
I did have
Yeah.
someone who did talk about, she was on, but you have to go to a retreat in, I believe,
Peru or Brazil or
Belize, I think is where she was
Rica,
at.
Belize.
Yes. Oh, no, Costa Rica. Costa Rica is where she was. To be able to, and they do the treatments there. It's not something you leave with. You don't leave with ayahuasca as far as what she, in her, the case of what they do over there. And again, it's another conversation of healing and what I say, fast tracking what could be years or sometimes decades in therapy that never really make a dent in the transformation that's needed for you to quote unquote lead a life. And more therapists are actually getting trained because they actually went into the field of therapy and counseling for those transformational, and they're, and saying like they want that for their clients, so they're now becoming trained and using the low dosing model in different ways, or at least referring their clients to organizations such as yours. I'm not aware of the number or the growing number, because again, with like everything, there's always the real and the fake. It's like they brought out the weight loss drug in the form of, and now they have all the knockoffs. Some people got water, some people got whatever. So we're not here to talk about that. So just know, check your sources. From me as a platform saying, I'm only speaking to Dr. Sharon Niv right now, and we are speaking on behalf of what joyous PBC does.
Yeah.
What everybody else says, do your research, right? She's giving us what they do. Go ahead, Dr. Sharon.
Yeah, no, Dr. Whyte, that's exactly right. There is a huge range of practitioners who've been trained with different medicines. And we do have a quality control issue because it is still largely illegal. Like there were a couple of podcasts that came out in the last 5 years about even within MAPS, this organization that drove forward the FDA proposal for MDMA to become approved. It's on hold right now. It got rejected. It'll be resubmitted, et cetera. But even within that organization that was considered gold standard, there were some of the researchers who were not adhering to ethical integrity. So you really do have to be careful and do your research. And I really hope that as these things become more legal, and I have good feelings about
Me too.
that.
Me too.
It feels like one of the true cross the aisle issues. Like RFK is pro psychedelics at this point. It's hard to find people who are actually anti psychedelics. Yeah.
Exactly. Because let's face it, I'm going to say what I say. Elites have been. They know. When I say elites, and this is not conspiracy theory, I'm talking about people who have money and make money at a certain level. They have been using psychedelics forever, and they have been telling us. It's not been a secret. It's just not been accessible to common blue collar and even some white collar people because it wasn't even about affordability. It's just that the science was not approved for us in any form or fashion and wasn't made available. And I'll say this for people who were like, well, I don't know if that's safe. Well, who told you that Paxil was safe, but you took it because your doctor wrote the prescription? Huh? Talk to me now. Let's fight. So my thing is like, this was my conversation, and I think it came from Oprah said it this way, and I liked it, but I was having this conversation about whether people who are taking, Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever, any of those meds to support their weight loss. I'm like, okay, so they can die from diabetes, high blood pressure, whatever, or take this drug and it help them. Either way, we're all going to die at some point, but I will say, here's this, give yourself a fighting chance. And that's what medication is. Just because the FDA has not approved anything, y'all know some of the stuff that they have approved that is not good for you. Yeah. So it's all the FDA approval means is legalizing. So taxation and distribution can be in certain channels. That's all that means. Because the cup of tea that your grandma taught you to make, if you're from my culture, because I'm not Chinese or Asian, but we are big tea people and brews of herbs. And so are people who are Asian cultures, traditional cultures, and then those are from Indian cultures, as far as I know. I don't know the rest. But we come with these brews. Those things weren't approved by FDA, but when you had a temper, you drank it. In less than an hour, you were running around.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe there was ketamine in some of this stuff, right? I don't know. We would never know what was in there because it was just stuff we picked from our yard. They were just different trees, or if we did, our neighbors had different, we call it bush. Our neighbors had different bush. We had different bush, and then we all kind of just do you have some of this? And they're over each other's fence, and the old grandma's like, oh, I picked some and I brought it for you. Yeah, you just boil it and put it there and drink it. And we're sipping tea. And when you're as a young child, you're just giving it. And even if you don't like it, you better drink it. And so for me, I'm having this argument because a lot of times we're suffering and we put ourselves behind these limiting beliefs about whether it's FDA. Now, I'm not saying not to look for safety. That's why Dr. Sharon and I brought up what those guardrails are. That's why we talked about speaking to your doctor and knowing their company and organization has the checklist for you to go through because they know how this affects different people to a certain degree. But what if your whole life is on the other side of this type of medicine?
That's exactly right. When you were talking, I just kept thinking, yeah, psychedelics should be your birthright. The ability to look at your consciousness directly, to connect with that sacredness, with your highest self, that's your birthright as a human. I really believe that. Good
Mm-hmm.
news about ketamine is it is FDA approved. It's a Schedule 3 medication, which means it's like less heavily regulated than even Adderall, which is Schedule 2. And for people who do have those medical questions, I do just want them to know they don't have to pay for Joyous until after they meet with a provider. They meet with a provider, ask all your questions, take a few days and think about it. And if you're like, you know what, that's not for me, no
Done.
harm
You
done. You've
checked it out.
wasted 20 minutes filling out our intake and then 20 minutes talking to her. Less than that for the intake, 20 minutes provider, whatever. It's not
Talking to a
long.
provider.
Ask your questions. Yeah.
Ask your questions, do your research. And if it feels right for you, my thing is always on anything is do it and do it now because your peace and joy and abundance is on the other side of you saying yes to yourself, not to medicine, not to anyone. So, Dr. Sharon, on this show, we always do flip the script. It's a moment. If you can share where you had to shift your own mindset professionally or personally, what was that mindset shift and how did it change the outcome?
Oh, I love that. Okay. I had to shift my own mindset away from just being like a content creator to being a
Mm,
program manager because I decided to start this Joyous for Therapists program. The reason for that was partially that we talked to our patients, we did surveys, we found out that something like 15% of our existing patient base of tens of thousands of patients were already bringing this medicine into the therapy rooms. And we
therapy
just thought,
room.
oh, wow, need to meet the moment. But then that changed my course from, thinking about like, what is the right content to send to the patients to, okay, I need to learn a lot about how do you run a program. Now I need to I'm like the mini CEO of this program. I need to figure out how do I do community management? How do I do sales? Like talking to the therapist is my sales pitches. Like, now
Yeah.
I need to navigate social media and PR and stuff that I've never really had to do, thinking about how to delegate tasks that I'm not strong at to people who do have those skills. I've always just sort of been like an independent contributor. I do my work and I put it out there and I'm done. And now it's like, well, no, I'm trying to run a program and I need to think more holistically. I had some limiting
Village.
beliefs around my own, yeah, my own organizational skills, which were, not completely unbased. I'm a little ADHD myself and not organization is not my strongest suit, but those limiting beliefs had to be worked through so that I could come up with plans of what to do and then start to actually execute on them. That is
Wow.
it's a set of limiting beliefs I'm still working through, and it's a transformation that I'm still undergoing, but it's a big one. So, that's been fun.
It's a big one and you took it on. How do you define success for yourself, Dr. Sharon?
I think that success is about, network properties, like getting
Mm,
changing the mindset of enough people, educating, psychoeducation, giving people the tools, and all in service of healing. All in service of healing.
mm,
Live in San
love it.
Francisco where everyone's techie, and I belong to communities where people come and talk about fusion and technology for environmentalism and longevity tech and biotech. All of that is awesome, but I've been saying for a very, very long time that all of our problems start with us. And so if we don't
Mm,
contribute enough of our thinking power to how to work with interiority, we're doing ourselves a disservice because we will keep screwing it up. The selfishness,
ooh,
the greed,
yes.
the animosity, the immaturity will just keep biting us in the ass, and we will create more and more problems, more wars, more exploitation of the earth and of other
Yes.
people until we kind of
Come
work
on.
on what's going on in here. So yeah, that's how I define success is shifting mindsets.
Woo! My people. I love it. So powerful. Oh, and I saw the energy coming from you ferociously, still in your feminine, but fierce. I love that. Let's do mindset bites to go. It's 90 seconds, and I step away from the camera and the microphone. If there's one thing you want our listeners to remember about healing the mind, what would that be? Here you go, Dr. Sharon.
Absolutely. So Ketamine is a very safe medication. You may have heard of it in different contexts, but it is fully approved. It is a very safe medication that is even used with children, and the efficacy is very high. And that's because it works on a different mechanism than other antidepressant, anti-anxiety medications. It seems to really get to the root of underlying patterns by allowing you through that state of spaciousness to make contact with the content that is typically too overwhelming. So what you're getting there is a real opportunity to rewrite the cognitive narratives, the neural pathways that have been keeping you stuck for a long time. It's a neuroplastic agent. This is an affordable program. You don't have to have a therapist. If you do, bring them over to get trained by us for free as well. And we hope to be affordable. We hope to give you the resources that you need in order to really heal from the inside out, not just stop the symptoms, but work with the interiority. That's it.
And I know everyone would love to know how they can connect with you and Joyous PBC and get going with exploring whether or not this type of therapy, psychoanalytic therapy with ketamine, the way you all prescribe it at Joyous, is good for them. Share with us.
Come check us out at http, joyous.team. That's our site. If you want to get in contact with me, it's just Sharon at joyous.team. And if you're a therapist interested in learning more about this program, it's joyous.team/therapy. Really easy. And that's it.
Yes. And of course, you all know we'll have the link in the description. I'll be taking an even closer look into this type of therapy. You can never outgrow healing. I'm constantly on the show talking about healing being a journey, especially when you've gone through obvious traumatic things that you know of. And even worse, so there's some traumatic things you have gone through. You didn't catch how traumatic it was. And then boom, it hits you. What do? Sometimes, like Dr. Sharon say, a lot of the individuals participating in their program have not been able to afford a therapist, but they're experiencing therapeutic relief and growth and healing. So that's the kind of thing that I want my listeners and viewers, Dr. Sharon, to know that's available to them. So thank you so much for coming in today and sharing in such honesty and simplicity some really heavy stuff. You made it so simple and easy for us to understand. Thank you so much for being here.
Right, it's been such a pleasure.
And yes, for therapists, we have a note, Dr. Sharon, where therapists who explore Joyous Therapists you have given them the gift here of a free CE training, right? If you could tell us a little bit about that before we go.
Sure. It's a certificate program in psychoanalytic therapy. So one of the reasons that this is appealing to many therapists is that unlike with the journey work where you need 3-4 hours and it's, you have to have like a bed in your office for them to lie down, this fits within your regular therapy session and you're an active participant. You get to use your skills. It looks much like any other regular therapy session. It's just that your client is coming in so much more ready to do the work. And they're open and they're spacious and less resistant. So it's 11.5 credits, and it's a good program, I hear.
Yeah, the fact that you're getting that continuing education credit is what we all need. Why not get in something you haven't explored fully yet? So remember, disruptors, today we learned something critical, that healing is not passive. The brain is adaptable. Neuroplasticity is real. But a personalized mental health care is not something that you can put off forever. It's emerging now. So if you know someone who's navigating mental health, just send them this information, send them this episode, get them connected to see if this type of treatment is something they can add or just start afresh on getting on the healing journey, because your brain is capable of change. Again, Dr. Sharon, thank you so much for bringing both science and compassion into this conversation. And we hope to see you around here more as you continue to grow your work. And to our listeners, keep mastering your mindset. Think, speak, do, become, and we'll see you on the next episode.